Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the Warframe Vauban Prime. But before we start, let's go over our commenter board. The first and top commenter of the last video was Thunderbear Gaming 4453, and our recent channel supporters are Whoopty-Wham, Nice Bear, and Colonel 06. Thank you so much for your support. So before we go over the build, I want to go over Vauban Prime's abilities for people that are not aware of them yet. And I'll have everything timestamped, so if you already know them or if you don't really care about them, you could always skip ahead to the next section. So Vauban Prime's passive is that he deals an extra 25% damage to incapacitated enemies. Vauban Prime's 1 is Tesla Nervos. He's going to throw a ball that's going to roll around and follow you, and it's going to try to attach to the closest enemy. It's going to stun that enemy and cause electric damage per second to that enemy, and it's also going to do AoE electric bursts every 1 second. When you cast Tesla Nervos, it's only going to throw out one of those balls. However, if you hold the button, it'll throw out up to 4 of those balls for no additional cost. And up to 4 of those balls can be active at once. Vauban's 2 is Mine Layer, and Mine Layer actually has 4 different parts to it, so bear with me as we go through all of these. The big thing though is that every one of these mines can be deployed 4 times. If you try to deploy a 5th one, it will let you, but it will take away the first one that you deployed. So only 4 of these can be active at a time, but that's per each one. So you could have 4 tether coils, 4 fleshit orbs, 4 vector pads, and 4 overdrivers. Now, I don't necessarily recommend having 16 of these out at a time because your entire gameplay would basically just be refreshing them, but it's something you could technically do. Okay, let's go over the first one, which is Tether Coil. So this is a coil that grabs enemies, inflicting slash damage and ragdolling enemies towards the center of its location. The second one is Fletchet Orb. This is an orb that shoots in all directions, causing puncture damage and forced puncture procs. The next one is Vector Pad. This is a pad that spawns arrows on the ground facing the direction thrown, and it causes allies and enemies who touch the pad to boost in the direction of the arrows. And then finally, Overdriver. Overdriver will jump to players or companions, granting 25% increased weapon damage for the duration. Vauban's 3 is Photon Strike. You're going to throw a beacon causing an orbital laser to fire in that area, and that laser causes blast damage and ragdolls enemies. Vauban's 4 is Bastille. And Bastille is a little bit complicated. It actually has 2 parts to it. So Bastille can be cast by tap casting or hold casting, and that will determine which part you cast. So there is the Bastille containment field, and then there is the vortex part of this ability. And even more complicated, the Bastille containment field can become a vortex as well. So we're going to separate this into 2 different kind of talkabouts for this ability. We're going to start with the Bastille containment field first. So this is going to suspend enemies. Enemies will be slowly armor stripped while affected. Vauban and allies in the containment field will also slowly gain up to 1,000 armor, and this is quicker if the containment field contains enemies with armor, but still happens even if the enemies have no armor at all. When leaving the containment field, this armor buff is kept for 10 seconds. The duration of that is affected by duration, of course, but is immediately refreshed upon entering another containment field or the same containment field you just left. After containment field's duration, or when manually done, it will collapse into a vortex for 3 seconds. The vortex will pull enemies in, ragdoll them, and do magnetic damage. The vortex part of Bastille, if you cast it separately, or if you manually change a Bastille containment field into a vortex, it's going to get an extended duration, actually closer to what the containment field actually is. But remember, the vortex part is just the vortex, so it only gets what we talked about before. It only pulls enemies in, ragdolls them, and does magnetic. It doesn't get any of the armor bonuses like the containment field does. That is specific for just the containment field. The subsume we're going to be using is Araxia's Webbed Embrace. You're going to throw your sack, causing a sticky webbed area. Enemies take toxin damage on entering this area. This traps enemies into cocoons, and cocooned enemies are debuffed with damage vulnerability. And you can have up to 3 of these webbed areas out at once. Now we're going to be putting this over Vauban's Photon Strike. Not that Photon Strike is not a good ability, it's actually a really good ability, so if you don't have the ability to subsume yet, don't worry, Photon Strike's really good and it pairs really nice with Vauban. The reason we're putting it over Photon Strike though is just because out of all of Vauban's abilities, it's the weakest link out of all of them. So that's why we put Webbed Embrace over it. About 8 to 10 hours of testing went into Webbed Embrace by itself. And so I just wanted to give a special thanks to NanoSquid and Asagari who helped with portions of that testing. A lot of this testing was seeing if Webbed Embrace worked correctly with Bastille, both the containment field portion and the vortex portion. And I'm happy to say that the damage vulnerability part of Webbed Embrace, really the real reason why we're using it, works perfectly with both modes of Bastille. There is one part about Bastille that doesn't work too well with Webbed Embrace. However, it doesn't work too well with pretty much anything in the game. And I think this is just one of the things that needs to be reworked on Vauban in general. Let me try to explain this a bit here. So containment field, that's the portion of Bastille that holds enemies up in the air. When they're held up in the air, they're going to start to be armor stripped. Slowly, but they'll eventually be armor stripped. Now, if they are hard CC'd by any other ability, anything that takes them out of that hold up in the air, will completely stop that armor strip, including Vauban Prime's own abilities, which is so friggin' weird. So Bastille itself will eventually turn into a vortex, and that vortex will stop that armor strip from containment field portion of Bastille. And I didn't test this part of it, but I'm going to also assume that the Tesla de Nervos, how it stuns the enemy it's on, that probably also stops the armor strip. So it's just really Bastille's containment field. The armor strip portion is really, really janky, doesn't work too well. I really feel like this probably just needs to be reworked by DE. And so for our build, we're going to look at this armor strip as just more of a happy little extra if it happens, but our build's not really going to be banking on this armor strip just because it's so janky. It doesn't work half or more of the time really. And yeah, it just is what it is. Now I just wanted to go over the basic playstyle on how you're going to be playing your Vauban. So you're going to start by throwing a vortex, which is the 4. Then you're going to throw containment field, which again is the 4. It's just a different way of pressing it. Then you're going to throw the 3, which is Webbed Embrace. And then you're going to go to Mine Layer and you're going to put out, I would say, at least 2 Fletchet orbs. You can do all 4 if you want. It really depends how long you want to spend throwing those mines out. And then you're going to make sure you cast your 1 and get all 4 of those orbs out. So let's go ahead and do that there. So we're going to do Vortex, Containment Field, Webbed Embrace. I'm going to throw out 1, 2. I can throw out 2. I don't like to spend too much time throwing the mines, but you can throw out 4 if you want. We get that out and that's it. Now, if you have extra time, Vauban's very busy on the controls, but if you find that you have extra time, go ahead and switch to Overdriver, I should say, and throw that out there, and that's going to give you a damage buff as well. And you're basically just going to reset all of this when it ends. So it's about to end here. Let me make sure I throw out my Vortex, Containment Field, Webbed Embrace, switch back to Mine Layer here, throw out 1, 2. My 1 doesn't really need to be recast, but let's say it needed to be recast. There we go. And that's your basic playstyle on Vauban. Now let's go over the mods. Our build is going to be a health and armor build, and for a valid health and armor build, you need 2,000 health and 2,000 armor. We look here, we don't have 2,000 health and we don't have 2,000 armor, and that's because it's all going to be coming from conditionals. So we're going to be getting over 2,000 health when Arcane Blessing is fully stacked up, and we're going to be getting over 2,000 armor because of Bastille's containment field. Remember, that's going to give us 1,000 armor altogether, and health conversion, which health orbs grant 450 armor, stacking 3 times. Taking damage will consume a stack after 3 seconds. So this gives 1,350 armor. I will always tell people though to only really count 900 of this, and that's because you'll frequently be down 1 stack. So we get about 900 consistent armor from health conversion, another 1,000 from the containment field on Bastille, and then we have that base 210, which is going to be over 2,000 armor. So we're fine there. So we have Umbral Vitality for health, Umbral Intensify for ability strength, health conversion we already went over. Prime Flow is going to increase our energy pool. Archon Stretch is going to give us ability range and also some energy over time on our electric abilities. Overextended is for ability range. Archon Continuity is for ability duration, and also the Archon effect, where toxin status effects will also apply a corrosive status effect. This is a very min-maxy mod. You don't technically need it. You probably could just use regular Prime Continuity. But the Archon version will technically give you 1 corrosive proc from Webbed Embrace. It's not huge, but 1 corrosive proc is technically a little tiny bit of armor strip. So that's why if you want to be super, super min-maxy, you can use the Archon version of Continuity. In the next slot, we have Equilibrium. Health pickups give 110% energy, and energy pickups give 110% health. So this is perfect and pretty much gives us all the energy sustain we need. And also, since we don't have any HP regen on the build, this also helps with our HP as well. In the Aura slot, I should say, we go for Growing Power, which is 25% ability strength. In the Exile slot, we go for Cunning Drift, which is another plus 15% ability range. And in the 2 Arcane slots, we're going to go for Arcane Blessing, like I said before, for more health to get over 2,000. And we're going to go for Molt Augmented for a combined total of 60% ability strength. Now I want to go over a few mods that just barely didn't make it on the build, but they're still really strong. And depending on how you want to do your build, if you want to switch things around, you may want to consider these. And so let's look at the first one, which is actually an augment for Vauban. It's an augment for his 1 Tesla Nervos. And that's going to be Tesla Bang. While a target has Nervos attached, any damage dealt to it will be absorbed by the Nervos and channeled into an 8-meter burst of electricity on death. It's really good for Vauban because he's sucking enemies all into like a little ball. And when that guy dies, it's just going to kind of explode there. So very, very powerful. It's just that on our build, we are extremely tight on mod space. The closest mod I could think that you might remove for Tesla Bank would be Archon Continuity. However, you still really, really need duration. So if you chose to remove Archon Continuity, you would need to replace all that duration with like Archon shards. Pretty much like 4 or 5 of your Archon shards would need to go to duration because of that. Now, the next thing I wanted to go over that's also a pretty damn good mod is Augur Reach for 30 ability range. 30 ability range doesn't seem like a lot, but Vauban's whole like shtick about him is sucking dudes in. So the more range he has, the better. And if you see here, we already have Stretch for 45 range. We have Overextended for 90. We have Cunning Drift for 15. You know, it is only another 30. It's not a big deal, but it's still really good on Vauban because of his focus on range. And again, though, we're very, very tight on mod space. The only mod I could possibly think you would remove for this would be Archon Continuity. And same thing, you would need to replace all that duration with shards. And then finally, the last thing I want to go over is the Aura slot. And this is probably the biggest one that I went back and forth a million times trying to figure. And that was Corrosive Projection. Where are you, Corrosive Projection? Let me just type that in here. Okay. Corrosive Projection versus Growing Power. So Growing Power is 25% ability strength. Really nice, affects everything. But Corrosive Projection is enemies lose minus 18% armor, which will also make you do more damage. So both of these are amazing. I went back and forth a million times trying to figure out how I wanted to showcase the build with Growing Power or Corrosive Projection. There's a good chance after this video I might put on Corrosive Projection after too. So you can make that decision yourself, Growing Power or Corrosive Projection. Both are really friggin' good, especially when you can consider that the containment field on Bastille is really janky. We're probably not going to reach that full armor strip anyway, and so that makes Corrosive Projection a little bit more valid. Because if you were intending to fully armor strip with the containment field, then you wouldn't need Corrosive Projection. But this thing is so friggin' janky that Corrosive Projection is very useful. So that's up to you there. Now we'll go over the externals for Vauban. All of these externals are only optional, none are mandatory. However, I think they do make Vauban just a little bit better. We'll start with Archon Shards and what I like to use for Archon Shards, and that is 2 for ability duration, 2 for ability strength, and 1 for casting speed. But I do go back and forth and see if I want maybe 2 for casting speed too, because remember, Vauban is very busy on the controls. He has a lot of balls he needs to throw out. And the quicker you can throw them balls out, the quicker you can actually get to shooting your damn weapons. And so 1 for casting speed is, again, it's optional, but I would say this is close to mandatory, but you might even like 2 or even 3 for casting speed, just because you'll be able to throw those balls quicker. For primaries, just consider that Vauban, along with pretty much any Warframe that has a sucking ability or a pull ability, a lot of times enemies will kind of get stuck like in walls or behind walls or in things. And so you really want to pair those type of Warframes with an AoE weapon that has the ability to do that AoE damage through walls. That way you don't constantly have to go behind things to clear out the trash enemies. And Because of that, I like to use the Kuvazar. It doesn't need to be the Kuvazar, just look for an AoE weapon that'll actually do its AoE damage through walls. For the secondary slot, you can either follow what I already said in the primary slot, where you're going to look for an AoE weapon that just does its damage through walls, or if you're going to use your primary slot already for that, then consider the Grimoire in your secondary slot. The Grimoire has a few different invocations that increase different stats. And for Vauban, duration is really nice. And if we look into the Grimoire here, there is an invocation called Riss Invocation that can increase your duration by up to 60%. And this lasts for 20 seconds. And all you have to do is alternate fire. So you don't even really need to use this build here. The only important thing is Riss Invocation. So once every 20 seconds, just kind of alternate fire into your big ball of enemies. You get a 60% duration buff, which could be really, really nice on Vauban. For the melee slot, there's a few different options you can go with here. However, the option I like is the Kota Haruto. The Kota Haruto has a trait where when it does a critical hit, it gives you a 5% lifesteal. Because Warframes do a bajillion damage, even a 5% lifesteal is frequently just going to be a complete HP top off. And like we said before, we don't technically have a HP regen mechanic on our Vauban. We're pretty much just using Equilibrium, which is good, but it's not always the most consistent. And so having the Kota Haruto being able to just full heal you with one punch in an enemy, I think is a great combo for Vauban. Now to go over focus schools. For Vauban, there are two focus schools that are really nice for him. And that's going to be Unairu or Zeneric. Let's go over Unairu first. So Unairu's passive is that you get 200 armor. Like we said already, our build for Vauban, he's going to be well over 2,000. After 2,000 armor, you start getting massive diminishing returns. So this 200 armor is pretty much nothing. However, consider that 1,000 of that armor that we are kind of counting there is from Containment Field, which is not going to happen right off the bat. When you first enter the mission in, you're not going to have that Containment Field armor up until you're finally set up in whatever room you're setting up in. So you're going to be pretty squishy for the first minute or two until you finally get set up. Now, I don't think the 200 armor is going to save your butt here, but it's going to be a little bit of a buffer until you're finally set up. However, just consider that once you are set up, you're not really going to need this 200 armor, so it's going to kind of be wasted there. But the other interesting thing for Nairu is that the active abilities for it are pretty good, and they combo kind of well for a Warframe that kind of sits in one place. If we look at Magnetic Flare here, this just creates a field that removes enemy shields, which is nice. And Caustic Strike is an armor strip that's really nice. You have a bunch of enemies all balled up with Vauban. Could be really nice to just full strip them with Caustic Strike here. But let's go over Zeneric next here. Zeneric's passive is that energy pickups grant 50% additional energy over 5 seconds. I think in general, when you compare Zeneric's passive to Unairu's passive, Zeneric's is probably more useful, because Unairu's passive is really only useful like the second you start the mission. Once you're actually set up with Containment Field, you don't need it anymore. Where the Zeneric's passive, this is going to remain useful throughout the game. Now, the negative to Zeneric is that I feel like Equilibrium by itself pretty much solves all of your energy issues, but it's still nice just to make sure you never have energy issues by picking Zeneric. And of course, the active abilities from Zeneric also help with energy regeneration if you wanted to cast them as well. And for the pet slot for Vauban, you're pretty much open to use whatever you want here. There are two pets that I think eke out a little bit ahead of the rest, and that's going to be the Mechanical Hound and the Panzervault Baphyla. And that's because of Vauban's playstyle, where he just kind of sucks all the enemies up into one big ball. And so as far as the Mechanical Hound goes, he can just do like one synergized Perspective shot and you have a crap load of those dudes primed up. Now, there's the unfortunate thing where most of the time on Vauban, you're going to be using a big AoE weapon, so you're not going to get a lot of value out of ranged CO like you would on a direct hitting weapon. But you always have that option to switch to a direct hitting weapon if you really wanted to. And then the other pet would be the Panzervault Baphyla, which doesn't prime as many elements as the Mechanical Hound does. Again, it probably doesn't matter because you're not really going to be benefiting from range CO most of the time. But he does very, very consistent viral priming. So I think both of those are great options, but again, they just eke out slightly over the others. I think if you went with any other pet, you'd be fine on Vauban as well. This is how you build out the Warframe Vauban Prime. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future content. So now I'll leave you guys with a 5-minute gameplay portion, kind of showing Vauban and his general playstyle. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye. All right, we're about to start this 5-minute gameplay portion up here. Let's go ahead and hack the terminal. We'll get into it here. We'll see what room we get, if we can get a good room to set up in. The hallway here is not too bad. What is this? Oh, it's the big circular room. This is a really good room for Vauban. So let's make sure we get our spawns in the room. Right now they're kind of all over here. Okay, let's go into the middle here, and we'll finally get set up. Do a vortex, do a containment field, do a webbed embrace. I'm going to throw a few of them actually. This is a weird room. It's a good room, but there's like 2 levels I think technically, so I don't think it would go down there. And that's really it. And this is really where the power of having an AoE weapon that can like go through walls, because like dudes are going to get stuck behind these like pillars and stuff here, which can be really annoying on Warframes that suck dudes in. Let me try to get a grimoire shot so I can actually get some better duration here. I'm self-staggering myself. 1 point for prime sure-footed. He's very busy on the controls is the one thing I don't really like about him too much. Like, I'd rather shoot my weapon. But, I mean, for defenses, though, like for group play, he's really good. This map is really going to showcase how you need to have AoE shooting through things. You know, some maps are gonna be better than this one. This is not a bad room. It's just a little bit awkward because of the pillars around the sides. Stop staggering yourself, Salt. Stop shooting the thing so close to you. Got about 1 more minute left. We'll probably kill an Acolyte when they come out. Now, I'm not a Vauban main, so I am not the best on the controls for him. You might have seen me like recast abilities multiple times when I didn't need to. And that's fair. You know, you'd be, if you're a Vauban main, you'll be better at pressing these buttons in the correct order that they should be pressed in. We got the Acolyte coming here. To my Tesla Nervosus back at 4 stacks. 20 more seconds left. That'll be a pretty decent showcase on how Vauban works. He is very location and room focused. Get these Thraxes down. Oh, they're going to interact with the webs there. Get back here. Oh, I need to switch from the Rappalack. I am so bad at aiming this thing. There we go.